Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Jeno Giordano, and he has a background in fitness, underwater welding, offshore construction, institutional finance, and what he is doing now is beyond basic description, but that's why we're doing the show. We'll get into all of it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stuart. Glad to be here.
So first thing that comes to mind is just diving into the underwater welding. How did you get into underwater welding?
That's an interesting segue. When I first it ultimately started based out of a fear, because I had a fear of drowning, and it was something that really meant a lot to me when I was graduating high school, because there was just something in me that was like, that made a lot of sense of like, I can't start my life fearing something. I have to like go at it full force. So I was like, man, what's something that I can do to confront that? And underwater welding kind of spotted up, because I was doing welding already in school. They do these trade school things in high school, and I was already really good at welding. And they're like, well, you do it underwater. I was like, oh man, that's my greatest fear, dying underwater. And then I just bolted into it. And man, that was something that really just changed my entire perspective on how I have applied really just primordial truths of who I am from that particular role that I played in the ocean. It was just something that really changed who I am and how I apply things now currently. So
What were you welding?
well, from either pipes, or we would do demo. Like one of the coolest dives we did was like, we set like a 400 pounds of C4 charge. Like, I mean, like we've done some really cool stuff. It's not all welding. Some of it's demolition, which is like the cool stuff, because you just kind of get to blow things up. And it's always kind of sketchy, because you're just like, I remember one time I had to go on a dive that a charge that was supposed to go off, and it didn't. So they woke me up for the dive, and they're like, hey, Gino, the charge didn't go off. And I was like, all right, well. They're like, yeah, but someone's gonna go get it. Because like we had to take the charge out
And it's
and
you.
then put a new one in. Yeah. So I was like, I'll do it, and everybody else is a little sketched out. I was like, oh, I'll do it. And so you get to do cool stuff. And then some things it's doing repair, where you're doing like, you're working on a platform leg mid-water, and you're cleaning some of the barnacles off, and then you can get to inspect, see how the welds are holding up on a particular horizontal crossover. Or I mean, it's a numerous amount of different jobs. One of the interesting ones that actually doesn't get a lot of enough credit is hand jetting, which is like basically you're digging a ditch under the sea floor, because most of the pipelines are actually buried. They're not just laying on top of the surface. Most of them have a regulation to be buried at various depths, depending on where they are in the Gulf or the ocean. And so the divers got to go down there in some instances, not all, but you got a hand jet if you're going to go inspect that pipe. And so it's kind of eerie, like being under the seafloor, because it's like you're kind of just going into an invisible, I would say, because you can't see. The viz is not always that great. So you have to go off your senses. And they used to train us in school to like, if you can learn how to navigate in your house blindfolded, it'll better prepare you for offshore work. And it did. And I used to do that all the time. So, because you can't see.
It's so fascinating.
It's kind of weird.
It's so fascinating. I got more follow-up questions on this. Was it, and you don't have to answer this, maybe too personal, but was it good? Was it well-paying job?
Yeah. The money was good when it was paying, meaning when we were working. And sometimes there's increments when you're not working, which can then kind of be offsetting to when you were working, getting paid well. And anybody that works offshore in the diving industry would understand that. And so, international work's always good. But I was a surface, air, and mixed gas diver. So I wasn't in SAT. So SAT, because everything's different in diving. They have surface air diving and surface mixed gas, and then SAT. So SAT's more of like the guys that are diving 1,000 foot
Wow.
plus. And I used to work on setting up all those chambers.
Wow.
And so you're pretty much living in a can for like 25 to 30 days, depending on the ratios of what's going on in the contract. But surface mixed gas is you have to work fast. So meaning you're not down there that long. Whereas a sat diver, your bottom time's like you may be down there for 6 hours working.
Wow. But you
So
said
and you have
chambers. I
you
don't
have a
understand the point about the chambers. You made a point about a chamber down there for a long time,
Mhm.
like months at a time.
Well, so saturation diving is you're living inside of a community bell. Okay. So that community bell, I'm just going to use as an example. It's like it's on the deck of the boat. So and it's pressurized to the bottom time or to the bottom of where you're diving.
Wow. So you
And
live
it's
in
like
that
it's on
pressure. You live in the
yeah.
pressure. Wow.
Think of it like this, like it's like the International Space Station on a boat. Okay. So you're living in that station and you get in a smaller bell when you go to work. And
Wow.
you and a tender, which is really the diver, you guys are alternating positions. You both get into the diving bell. The crane picks that bell up, drops it in the water. When it hits the pressure where you're pressurized to, the bottom just opens up because you just equalize pressure. So it's kind of weird. And then you go down and you dive and you go do the work. But those guys, it's a little bit more lenient. I should have did that because surface mixed gas is kind of like you have to work really fast, and any errors you make, you kind of just blow the whole dive. Whereas the sat diver, you got like 6 hours to do what you got to do. So the stress is, in my opinion, is less because you just take your time, you do your work, you go back to the bell, and then you just kind of you alternate positions with the other guy, make sure he has what he needs. Where surface gas is fast. You got to get going. And surface air is even faster.
Is the reason you didn't do the 6 to 8 hour version because of living in that pressure, having to live in that pressure for so long, or was it something else?
Well, it's usually, honestly, it's just something that I wasn't around enough
To know.
because it's something
Yeah.
by proxy. So if you're around it by proxy, you'll eventually lead into that direction.
Mm.
I was just in proxy relatively close to a lot of work with surface and mixed gas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I was at. And I just tended to do that. But I had a lot of friends that were sat divers and they're always, always trying to get me in that direction. But I was never, again, I wasn't in proxy to that type of work to get closer familiar with it. I understood how the setup worked. It was something that was interested because the pay was even better. And but again, like I was having fun when I was doing, which was doing surface mixed gas. Because you're still diving at deep depths. Like I was still diving at like 300 feet. But you get to you get to see the sun and walk around and stuff
Yeah, yeah,
after
you're
the
not
dive.
stuck on
You
a
know what I
boat
mean?
for 30 days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But my longest hitch was like 206 days straight. So like my work ethic commitment really, that's what I really enjoyed about offshore is that if you really wanted to accelerate fast in a profession, offshore will really allow you to kind of do that. Same thing I'm sure with military too, is like, whereas on land, you can't really if you have that strong work ethic where it's just like, I want to work every day for 12 hours a day until I'm the best at what I'm doing. You can't really do that on land because they don't really allow you to do that. Whereas offshore, there's like, you want to stay out here for 200 days straight. Like, let's do it. So I was able to kind of accelerate really fast in that field, and I enjoyed it greatly. And the welding part was really cool, but hand cutting is really cool too, which is like you basically have a torch and you can just cut through, metal. And water jetting is even more. It's like called water blasting, where you have a nozzle that's shooting out like 25,000 pounds of psi of water pressure. It's like a very, very tiny, small needle of water coming out, and you can just laser cut
Wow.
thick metal.
Wow.
So everything's like really cool down there. Like you get to work with
Yeah.
some pretty big things. Yeah.
So you were on a boat for 260 days, basically, and then you would just jump down. How many people were on the boat?
Right around 70. I dove a lot on a 4-point. So a 4-point is an anchor is a diving vessel that has 4 anchors. So on all 4 sides. So it can kind of reposition the boat as the dive is the project is kind of underway. So because the project's moving, so the boat vessel can move. And then sometimes we would dive on an oil platform or a jackup, which is a boat that has 4 columns, vertical columns that enable it to jack down, which then brings the boat up. And so I dove off those. And also there's other types of vessels that have like automatic, they're basically stabilizer jets on the side of the boat that allow the boat to stabilize without anchors. And those are pretty cool. Usually have like a moon bay in the middle. It's like it has this big opening in the middle of the boat and you can dive through there. Pretty cool stuff out there though. And then barges. I was actually telling my dad the other day about a barge I was on. I was talking about the size of we were actually setting an oil platform for the first time. And they're so big. Like you see them from the beach sometimes, or you see them elsewhere, but like when you walk up close to it, it's like, oh my gosh, like size scale seems to just kind of like, it's like looking at a skyscraper, you know? The smallest things you would think that put things together are like actually just ginormous. Like a normal day shackle pin or a shackle, like that shackle pin may be the size of a forklift. And as a diver, you got to get that shackle pin out of the shackle. So you got to figure out a MacGyver way underwater to get that shackle pin out. So it's like some of the smallest things in life that you would be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna get this out. Underwater, offshore, it's like a project of like maybe 70 men trying to figure out how we're going to do this. And I like that camaraderie.
That's interesting.
I do miss from that.
So, and the last question on this, do you know, is it for all the internet sea cables that allow for internet to go from continent to continent, are divers doing that too, or is that all automated?
I can't speak with clarity on that because I never worked on that type of work.
Yeah.
I would assume that may be with ROVs, which is in combination. We used to dive with ROVs too, but it's a combination of probably 3 things. One with divers, the second one with ROVs for inspections as well, and then doing auto layers. So it's the same thing that we would how we lay pipe is the same way they probably lay the lines, which is like a boat that's moving with a cardinal direction of where they're supposed to through the GPS.
Yeah.
And they have it's a sophisticated setup, but they're just dropping the line.
Yeah.
And it's on an auto spool, so it's just rolling. It may take them a long time, but again, I never worked on that, so I don't know.
So
per se how they're doing it.
I asked ChatGPT while we were talking, and it does say purpose-built ship known as cable laying ships are used to deploy the cable with large spools to hold the cable and advanced positioning systems to ensure accurate placement. So that's accurate. Yeah. Fascinating work. So how did you get to where you are now from there?
Well, it was such an interesting thing, because if you were to like really track my background, it would seem almost sporadic, but yet it seems that it's almost like absorbing what I get from something, which is like, again, my initial was like conquering a fear, and being down there was just like ultimately conquering that fear, and which really felt like somewhat empowering, because again, most people don't really conquer like, what is your greatest fear?
Yeah.
And they're really facing it in full front and for years. And to the point where it's like, okay, I have faced this fear.
Yeah, does it exist anymore? Are you still scared of underwater?
I would say I honorably respect it, because you don't really defeat it, because water is something that is a profound wisdom that I've gained in that experience. And, you know, I wanted to say this part and kind of carry on how I migrated out of it. But I felt like one of the check key points for me that allowed me to like unlock this, because I could have kept going and doing it, even though it's a young man's game. Meaning you want to do it young, because a lot of the peers that were experts all had like missing fingers and stuff. And I'm like, oh man, I don't want to lose my fingers. You know, like I like my fingers. But and I had a lot of close calls. Like I've had like 5 or 6 like near-death experiences that were just insane. You know, from one having like a mass cave in on me, like a 16-foot. I was at the bottom of the ocean working in a ditch, and the sidewalk collapsed, so I got buried. And that was one experience that was just terrifying, because
did somebody have to rescue
it's
you?
really heavy. I actually had to rescue myself, because I had it's eerie down there, because if anything does go wrong, it's not like SAT. You don't have a standby diver that's there that's like 30 feet from you.
Somebody else has to come
surface
down.
Yeah, well, the standby diver on surface air in this particular instance was, 5 minutes away. He would have to get a hand jet to him, because he's got to find me, because it's not like there's a GPS tracker down there and he can just like look in a perfect viz situation. I mean, I already did the math in my head as soon as it collapsed on me. And then the flapper valve on my hat got jammed. So now water's seeping into my hat. So I'm basically waterboarding myself in the hat, and I'm compressed. But I still had the hand jet on me, thank God. And I was able to like wiggle that hand jet pressure close to my hat so I could get that flapper valve unjammed, and then pretty much birth myself from the ocean floor, which was kind of like a rebirthing process. It felt like. But that was one, and I've had numerous other times that were just as close. I almost lost my entire arm on one dive. We're pulling on a crane where dude, that was so eerie. I almost losing my arm. Sometimes I think about that and I'm just like, man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But anyways, I don't want to get off on the storylines. We could have a specific podcast on all the dive stories, because that would be in its own on its own instances, kind of like interesting. But where I would say that the checkpoint for diving for me, where I felt like I was complete, was just really experiencing what the ocean had to offer. Have you ever? I wanted to ask this question. Have you ever seen those dinoflagellates? Those they're like bioluminescent glowing organisms. Have you ever seen those on the beach?
Yes, yeah.
So I was on a midwater dive one night at 3 a.m. I think it was like 200 feet. I was on a water stop at 1:30, and a cluster, I would say about half a mile by half a mile square, was migrating through the underwater currents and went through me on a water stop. And it was just immensely, it would pulse on in synchrony, meaning it was like perfect harmony. They would turn on all at once.
Wow.
And they would turn off all at once at the same time. And they were moving through me. So I was like in this avatar blue sun, and then it would automatically go back to pitch dark. And I was just like, I don't know, man. Like, that's the type of stuff that I felt like I was complete in my diving career. I was like, this was the most beautiful thing I could have ever experienced. And I felt like it was time to kind of migrate outside of that career path, because I was just like, I don't know, it was just like nature just gave you the perfect.
Can't top it.
Was like it was too beautiful to just be like, to continue doing it. It was just like, man, I don't think I'll ever see this ever again. This was it. And so, but kind of leaving from that particular field, I moved to Vegas, and then I started to get involved in, which is really a contrast environment, which was dealing with this is so random, but it was relative to my understanding of what I'm doing now, which is actually working. And I had a friend that was connected with the casinos in the Venetian and the Palazzo in Vegas, and they're like, hey, you ever thought about like because I told them I was a diver. They're like, dude, your stories are so wicked cool. You got to be a VIP host at our casino. And I was like, dude, like, what is this? Like, this has nothing to do with my background.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, dude, but your stories are pretty cool. And people could relate to this through curiosity. I was like, all right, I'll do it. And so I did that. So I was a VIP host out at the Venetian in the Palazzo. And that was like this contrast from underwater welding to interfacing with international clients all over the world. And I was just like, and it was a hit for me because I was like, it was so different in
Yeah.
contrast, and yet I was learning something new. And then, I went from that, did that for 2 years. And then I had this invention where I invented a product called SwingFit, which which was really something interesting because my background's in fitness, but also track. I was an All-American athlete in the quarter mile. And basically, I just had this epiphany one day to build something that would allow athletes to work out in the air.
Mm.
And, I invented that product, and that product did really well. I created like a local franchise out of it. And we had it, it's still actually in gyms today.
Mm.
And people from around the country still use it. But that was like a really interesting time because I was a group fitness trainer. So I really applied what I learned in Vegas to group fitness, which was like interfacing with people and training people in fitness, which was something that was relative to my track career. And so I did that for 5 years. And then from that point, I moved into institutional finance, which was learning how to trade on the market. And I was mostly ultimately trading on the blockchain. So I was just getting involved in blockchain right around 2016 and started interfacing with that. And I learned so much about over-the-counter trading institutions because I was ahead of an OTC desk. So I would set up the KYC channels, which was again something so contrast to what I was doing previous. But so it's like this big chain of contrast, but have been amalgamating what I've learned from each to carry over to the next. And learning so much about how institutional finance worked. Then I just migrated into really what changed my whole perspective was the finance, because it told me how the dark pools worked in institutional finance, which is completely how you think it works, like from like regular exchanges. These were all like back end OTC deals that were moving in dark pools. So you really got to learn how billions of dollars move through the network
Through the system
without impacting the price.
Yeah.
Because if someone has $1 billion of Bitcoin, or maybe 3 or 4 billion, how do I get out of position without like decimating an exchange price, which then impacts my ability to maintain my liquidity of a buy and sell. Of if I'm selling at spot price, what am I getting in return? Because these guys are doing swings too, swing trades. So that was really eye-opening for me. Like I was just like mind blown. Like I couldn't believe how the world worked in a sense. And which really led me to these conclusions of like, because I was living in Colorado at the time. And, just something really changed in me because I was living in a beautiful mountain house out in Nederland, Colorado, which is in Boulder County. This house was like, I would say I was at 9,000 feet up. So when the clouds would pass through, like the clouds would go through my living room. Like it was the coolest place. And so anyways, like I just felt like I was on top of the world in a sense of like the optics, because like my backyard was full of moose, foxes, bears, eagles all the time. And, the hummingbirds would literally just land in your hand up there. And, there's something out there that's changed me substantially to being so immersed with nature that I felt called to be like, if you really could apply everything that I've learned, how could I make the world better in a sense? And which then led me to this passage that I've been on for this last since 2018, 2019 to current, which is taking everything that I've learned and applying myself to how can I make the actual world better in a fundamental sense, but not being like everyone else. Meaning, how can I be super original, but yet not so out there that I'm just kind of all
You're not taking
alien to
serious.
reality.
You're not taken seriously.
Well, not taken seriously and originally in the beginning was weird at first, but I find that if you really want to invent something that's different, you better have thick skin, because people are going to definitely not believe in you.
Yeah.
You know, people find comfort in things that they can tangibly relate to instantly.
Alienness. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've definitely learned a lot. And
this is really interesting, because what I like where we started, where underwater welding, there's a sort of existential fear of death, but then the alienness, it relates to that existential fear. The two biggest fears for most people, well, there's three. The just two main biggest ones that are really related are fear of death, and then related to that is death of the mind, which is going insane, which is becoming completely alien, which is Crazy Wisdom is about that fear. Because back in 2018, 2020, I confronted that fear with this show, like an exploration of truth into that going crazy, because I had this fear of going crazy. And it's related to this alienness. And so it feels like you conquered the fear of, or deeply respected the fear of the prime fear of death for you. But then what I love about it is you also went from this undersea natural world with no verbal exchange whatsoever. You're out there on your own in silence in the ocean, and the ocean is a common metaphor for this sort of fear of death, but also fear of spiritual progress, because it's like the fear of personal death of the ego. And then you would then transition to that talking with rich people and weaving stories in this linguistic world, which gets into the crazy world of social consensus. Because when you're dealing with those types of people, there's a sort of social consensus, and then there's the contrariness to the social consensus as well, which makes people rich. But then there's also a necessity to stay near that social consensus as well, and the alienness. And so, what are your remaining fears, and how do they tie into what you're doing now?
Oh, I love these questions. These are good. That is something that I've always applied, which is, what is my greatest fear currently? And then going after that, face forward. You know, my current fears right now, and again, it's not something that drives me to fear it. It's more of I look at I look at it as the resistance in which I must pierce through. So it can become a support, you know? And my current fear, which is so weird, it's that what I'm currently working on will be seen by everyone, and they just may not understand. They may not understand the current perspective of who I am, but in time it'll later kind of unfold. It's kind of like that song, the Goo Goo Dolls. Have you ever heard it?
No. Tell me. Yeah.
Well, it's like, I don't want the world to see me, because I don't think they know. I don't think the world will understand who I am.
Yeah, interesting. Ooh, that's juicy territory there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it's a very interesting paradox, because I want to build something that I want the world to see, and yet at the same time, when I'm ready to present it, I also fear that the world will actually absorb every part of it, and then just analyze it, and then judge me for it. So it's kind of like, I don't want to be judged, because I'm really just a low-key person. I'm just kind of, I enjoy nature, man. Like, if it was up to me, I would just backpack in the wilderness, because I just really enjoy nature. But when I was in Colorado doing backpacking, because I was going to leave and move to Bali, because I was going to leave the States, and I was on a backpacking hike, and I don't know, I had this spiritual connection, because I was hiking to the mouth of the Colorado River. like where it begins, you know? So we did like a mountaineering hike through the mountains
Mm.
and to that point. And I was in this one area of it. And it was just such a spiritual moment at night that I just felt like this outer body experience of just like, you are to like, it was just like reassuring me what I was doing,
Mm.
but I was really on the edge. It's like, do I really want to do this? Because I know the repercussions of what I do, right?
Mm.
Like, I'm not just like fumbling around in life. Like, I know that if I do this, it's going to have an impact that here, here, and there. And I was scared because I don't want to do something that no one wants to do something that they're going to be hated for, you know? Like, no one wants to do that, at least not a logically sound person or reasonable.
Yeah.
And I'm reasonable. And I didn't want to be like that, to be in this lens of judgment. But I knew that I had the capabilities to solve something that was really hard
Uh,
and that could really point out the taboos and create a solution around something that I find to be really rusted
mm.
in the gears of the engine of the earth,
Mm.
from how the way the economics work, from
Mm.
finance to how we look at how value works, to
Mm.
how do we manage society. Like, there's a lot of insights that I've learned through these nooks and crannies that you don't really see through the public lens, but there's corridors, what I
Mm.
call the deep underbelly of the abyss,
Yeah.
that is there. And you can brush shoulders against it every now and then if you're fortunate enough. And I've been fortunate enough to absorb windows of those opportunities and say, so in that moment of that spiritual essence of being in the wilderness, it was like, you have to do this. Like, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it, and it's just like full throttle. And so that's what I've been doing. And it's been, I find that like all my dive stories are cool, but I find that the origin story of this playbook that I'm working on for, and I call it, and everybody has these taboo words on like what they consider
Yep.
socially sound or
Yeah.
acceptable. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you said that word, like that's weird, but it's, I try to like lean into this comfortably and say, like, we all, as citizens of the earth, right? We all want the world to be better,
Mm.
right? You know,
Yep.
even our parents do. Even, they
Yep.
may not know how, or
Yeah.
we may not know how, but we
Everybody's
all
working to
want
their
a
everybody's
better.
working to their own good, even if they're
Yeah.
psychopaths or sociopaths, they just think that their own good is in the ego and their selfishness and stuff like that. They just think that there's
So,
like a mistake basically. But yeah, I agree.
yeah. Yeah. Everybody wants it better. And so, when you hear words like, oh, a new world order or whatever, they tend to get
Mm.
really like,
Yeah.
it stings the vertebrae.
Yeah.
And, I kind of like look at it. I always wish, especially when this gets published, when I
Yeah.
when I do publish this, because it's coming soon,
Yeah.
is that I open people to look at the world as an Earth colony.
Mm.
And if we were to observe ourselves as an Earth colony, we may find that what the Earth actually needs is a new Earth order, in a sense of how we look at ourselves and how do we organize society and manage the counterparts in which we consider normal. Is it normal, or is it normal to evolve and update certain instruments?
Mm.
So that's really what my elements are within this playbook, because it's not a book, because a book can seem normally like it's a story. Like,
Mm.
oh, here's a story about, the plot, and the plot ends in this. Like, we, and that's not what this is. This is an instruction manual of how we take the critical pillars of society, of civilization,
Mm.
and then update them to get what we want, which
Mm.
is, how do we go about doing it? Who do we need to make this work?
Mm.
And then let's execute on this. And I find that and it covers everything. Like, and it's probably going to agitate a lot of people, because it's going to hit on points where it's like, that challenges my ideologies. And it's like, well, we can't always cherry pick morality.
Mm,
You know, we have to draw a line of what is functional and what's not functional.
mm,
And then what is life and who are we without rules?
mm,
So those are always these two buckets. If you observe humanity, we're always, because you can apply rules to people, but they're still who they are no matter what,
mm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
There's
like
something.
the evolution of humanity. Like who we are without rules is who we are. Now you can, so be careful what you apply on humans because they
Mm,
still are who they are.
yeah.
So, and then make sure when you are applying tools to them that they're functional, because if they're not functional, then you have a, then we have these conflicting paradoxes of society not moving in the direction where all the generations that are existing are in favor of the function
Mm,
because they feel like it's not functionable and they feel that the rules applied to them are are, are suppressive, meaning they're not enabling themselves to be who they are, right?
mm,
In that primordial
mm,
sense. So
mm.
that's the balance of this that I felt like I've balanced it really well in a very unbiased way.
Mm.
And that's my greatest fear that everybody will see it because but at the end, you know, I've become comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, I love it because again, it goes back to the theme that we've been talking about, which is the unconscious. You spend a lot of time in the ocean, which is like the primordial sense of the unconscious, and all the Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj, all those guys talk about the ocean of consciousness, like this little, this little separate self merges back with the absolute in the unconscious. And so there's a deep underbelly in the abyss. That's a really great term. And I would like to ask, particularly around finance, and it feels related to everything else, because finance feels like it is the unconscious of, it feels in many ways it is the unconscious of society and all these different things. So many things we learned from understanding economics and finance, which gets into where I am in Argentina, where like the president is an economics guy. He knows microeconomics, and he's causing a lot of triggering, as you mentioned, of a lot of people all over the world, because he's doing something that's very triggering to a lot of people. And so what did you learn in the deep underbelly, in the abyss, as it relates to finance? And, in the last 15, 20 minutes or so, what's the suggestion, if you can share it, what are you suggesting to overhaul that deep underbelly of the abyss in terms of finance?
Well, there is a paper that I recently published in December of this past year that was called Earth Economics.
Hmm.
And because I reinvented how economics should work on the earth.
Hmm.
And I always look at this and I always strive anybody that has an economic background or any background in any specialty field is that when reading something that is I would say as challenging as this is, being it's challenging the status quo, is to look at this as not a species that was born of the earth, but as a visitor from
Hmm.
another galaxy
Hmm.
and visiting the earth. And your role, persona wise, is to solve the earth colony's problems or issues that you see unbiasedly. Because again, you're not part of it. You're observing it
Hmm.
from this other spectrum of thought. And being in the ocean has really
Hmm.
taught me to do this. And by doing this, this kind of like breaks down the veil
Hmm.
of your tunnel vision as a
Hmm.
human, which is like this is the way it's always been because this is the way I've heard it.
Hmm.
And the Earth economics paper has a lot to do with how do we value Earth's assets.
Hmm.
And a lot of my research found was that the Earth is the value. We
Hmm.
tend to like put, you know, commodities as the value, meaning like certain things like, we used to have a gold standard. That
Hmm.
was a thing.
Hmm.
And then we moved to a different standard. Now we have the paperback, which is just kind of like print as we go.
Hmm.
There's not really a tangible value
Hmm.
to money
Hmm.
anymore.
Hmm.
And the thesis that I put together has a lot to do with, I started doing research on what is the spheres of Earth and what is the value of each sphere.
Mm.
And there's a lot of research that is empirical evidence that I built it off on. It wasn't just me cooking up ideas in my room or in an office. It was looking at empirical evidence of what is the value of Earth
Mm.
and finding as much evidence as I could to find the values of the Earth and how do we create a stable dollar. For an example, an Earth dollar.
Mm.
Like if we were to create an Earth dollar, how would we stabilize that? What is it? What is this? What is the intrinsic value of Earth?
Mm.
And then if you can do that, then you have to, and what I call the Earth valuation. And then I broke that down. That's in papers that I provided. And the Earth economics is a new tax system, which is a flat tax of 10%. And you can actually create more tax revenue that way than what they're doing now. We're overtaxing. And a lot of the things that we're doing is really just broken.
Yeah.
And it's like broken tools on top of broken tools, standing on broken glass, and more broken tools. And it's like, oh my gosh. So in finance, I find that our problems are easy resolvable as so long as we look forward and not backwards. Meaning like, oh, we got to repair what we've broken. No. Let it go. Like, sometimes it's good just to kind of like build something new and then migrate to an evolution, because that's what evolution is. Like we're evolving as a species. We're not repairing who we were 1,000 years ago. Like, geez, like we're progress. So that all these tools are progressive tools to how do we, and I even built a new banking structure. How do you build a banking structure that is connected to that Earth tax? How is that connected to an Earth dollar? How does that connect to frontier society where, a frontier sector of how do you generate profit? How is profit distributed? Because a lot of the finance today is that we make money off of capitalism and other aspects of insights, meaning I have more wisdom than you because I have insights that you don't have. So now I can trade based on that insight. And it can really and then there's leverage, there's futures and options. And if you understand how that works, we've created instruments that if you really get to the top, you can just wreak havoc on everybody else. And there's nothing anybody else can do because they're just kind of in for the ride. So I found ways through that insights is how do you, because that's humans without rules. Again,
it's an anarchic system.
If you give humans without rules, because this is who we are, if you give them tools to catapult themselves to dominate, because they will dominate. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. Some people would say, oh, that's terrible. But we've given them the tools to. So who's really at fault? We are who we are if we give us the tools, Because if I gave you a tool and insights to data that you can make endless amounts of money.
I would go use it to dominate.
So a lot of the tools that I invented was, and I don't like using the word equality because not everybody is equal in the sense of some people actually put forth more effort than others. Some people don't. So there isn't an inequality across that sphere. So I really found a way through the Earth economics to prioritize people that are building things that are impacting humanity in a good way to make profit. But the acts of making profit from selling things, I find that if you take society and you simplify this to a cost basis supply chain and you sell things based on the cost, you'll build things that you love doing because you enjoy doing it.
I didn't understand. So cost basis supply chain, what do we have now, if not a cost basis supply chain?
Well, we don't have a cost basis supply chain. What we have is I may own a supply chain. Okay. So I own this sector, really dominate it, me and 3 people.
Got it.
If I own that supply chain, I basically can now charge whatever I want to charge.
Monopoly.
So, but if you take a supply chain and you make it cost basis, meaning the basic necessities of life should be cost basis, meaning what they cost to build is what they should be cost to sell. Now you may say, well, how does people make money?
Mhm.
It's like people make money based on things that impact society in ways that are positive.
Mm.
And it's like, all right, well, who's grading that? Well, there's a grading measurement tool that I've invented for all these things. And it's not as suppressing as it may look. It's actually very eye-opening to look at. Yes, you have to give a little bit up to gain something,
Mm.
because you can't just keep everything and gain everything. That's not
Mm.
how that works.
Mm.
But you have to look at who's really the loser here overall by not having a cost basis supply chain.
Mm.
The people. You have
Mm.
inflation rates that are averaging 40% and higher. You know, it's not like the people of the earth own any of this stuff. Like really nobody owns any. Earth is really this thing that we've kind of like cornered and say we own Earth.
Yeah.
Technically the Earth is unownable.
Yeah.
If anything, the Earth owns us.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually countered. But you know, to that point is that paper talks about how that mechanism works and how people make money in that ecosystem. Because money is the fundamental fulcrum of how you change the earth, and governance, which is also something that I invented, called Earthtocracy, which is a new governance model that has built on top of earth economics. And I'm using those words just to kind of build relevance. They may change in time, but the point is that the governance models that we use today are broken.
Mm.
We can't really agree that democracy is thriving.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's conflicting, if anything, because if you understand how the engine works, like its counterpoint, like if you were to like look at the blowout chart of all the different governance models that have ever existed, and really don't look at the figures of the leaders who was the leader of them. Irrelevant. You're getting too emotionally attached. Look at the instrument panel that they used, and how do those instruments work? And if what I found is that I was taking bits and pieces from each one of them and being like, I like the way that instrument works, and I'm going to put it over here. So through that assembly, I found something that enables this localization, because the decentralized ideology has really blossomed since Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And, people tend to really gravitate to that, but they also don't understand we're living in a global society. Meaning if I want to jump on a plane and fly across right now, you're a globalist. You're not a villager. You know what I'm saying? Like you're benefiting from the globalist instrument panel.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I want to buy a product from Amazon because its source origin parts are from 16 different parts from the world. You're a globalist.
This is a great question. What is a globalist? Because that word is thrown around quite a bit. I am very global in my outlook. I live in Buenos Aires. Most of my mind sphere is in the United States. And so I'm like I'm like in this global world. But am I a globalist? I don't know. I don't know what that means. What is a globalist?
Right. That's an interesting. So when I mean globalist, because again, like you said, like there's different tiers of like, because people think like Klaus Schwab.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The World Economic Forum globalist, right?
Yeah.
When I mean globalist in this context is that you are participating in a global world sphere.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're buying everything local, meaning everything you've done local in your reality, you haven't really left your village. Then you're definitely not participating in the global economy in any form or fashion.
Yeah.
But you can't jump on a plane and benefit from a global world.
Yeah, it's
right?
super
That's
interesting.
all playing a part, and benefiting from that, but also counter trade it, meaning I forbid this to exist.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, if you forbid that to exist, make sure that you don't show up at an airport,
Never
and make
use
sure that you don't go on Amazon,
Yeah.
and make sure that you really buy everything locally in your community from now on.
Yeah.
And now it gets weird because it's like, oh man,
that's really hard.
I meant, yeah, it's like, so and to that point is that really we are an Earth colony. So globalist has a weird negative connotation.
Yeah.
And it does because people attach whoever the leader or the speaker of that movement it as the instrument panel. And that's a fallacy.
Yeah, interesting.
Because and we love to do that, meaning that, and I find that to be not helpful. Meaning what the instrument panel is and then make that the movement, not the speaker
Mm.
or whoever is vocalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And because I find that we're moving towards an earth-centric reality.
Yeah,
We're getting more and more connected,
yeah,
which is not a bad thing,
yeah.
but we just need to make sure that we have a linkage where, because we fear centralization. What we really fear, from my understanding, and I wanted to make, I'm glad we got on this topic because I want to say this to the audience, is that, and I've been fortunate enough to be in positions to where I've seen viewports of how the earth is working. And sometimes it's financial, but sometimes you see the bigger picture, right? And I've just been privy to things. Even in Vegas, I've been privy to certain things. When you're hanging out with people from all across the world that are coming in,
Yeah, with a lot of
you
money.
just meet people you would have never met in a reality.
Yeah.
Realities that exist that you don't even realize exist. And it's so interesting. But anyways, the viewports that I've seen is that the world is truly decentralized and fragmented.
Yeah.
And what we think is centralized is truly we are fragmented.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a paradox because the media is pushing this globalistic agenda where we're becoming centralized, and everybody's getting triggered by that because no one wants to be ruled by someone.
Yeah.
But in reality, what happens is through this decentralized fragmentation is that we don't really have, instead of one ruler where we all know who that is, we have 10,000 rulers and we don't know any of their names. Okay. Now we've made a real mess of the matrix because now we don't even know who we should be disliking.
Yeah.
Because so that's what's confusing. So Earthtocracy tends to reorganize how we are looking at governance on the earth and how do we enable the city to have the ability to navigate like a country. Meaning it's like, I call it centrally distributed ledger, meaning it's centralized, but it's centralized at each component of the vertical vertebrae. Because if you own a house, believe it or not, you are a centralized authority of that house. All right. So this big fear that you believe that may happen somewhere else
is
you're doing
it.
You are embracing that in every aspect of your individual life. If you own a company, that company is in reality a totalitarian state of an entity, meaning it makes top-down decisions. Now it may involve different layers of the company to help make a decision, but again, it's a top-head state. So the same thing is occurring all over the place in regards to companies and individual asset owners. But when it gets to city-ran corporate, a city or a state or a country, it's not like that. People think that a president has this superseding power. Man, that the president, if you look at the instrument panel of how the Senate and the representatives,
now the bureaucracy too, because now you got the unelected bureaucracy. But we won't have time for that because we only got a couple more minutes left before I have to take off. But we can do another one. We'll put another one down on the calendar for 6 months from now. But anything else? Do you want to tie it up together in the last few minutes?
Yeah, just ask a question. I'll be glad to.
Well, let's leave that for another time. But how can people find out more? How can people maybe find the literature? Have you released it yet?
Well, I've released parts of what I'm working on. And again, what I've made publishable on ResearchGate and Zenodo, which are just publication sites. And I also have a Substack. If you type in my name,
oh great,
Jeno Giordano, on Substack, you'll find me. But again, and also on ResearchGate, those are just pre-publications to what I'm really working on. And that's kind of like the surface of the iceberg. What's underneath is still being released in incremental stages because I have an enormous amount of information that have been culminating 7 days a week, 16 hours a day of putting this all together. So the playbook that I'm working on right now, which is this all-encompassing, I'm looking to have the draft done by end of year
Hmm.
and potentially have the publication in Q1 of 2025.
Hmm.
And again, this is actually an interesting paper, and I don't want to say too much more because I'll let the audience how they view it when it's ready. But it is the closest thing that I have found to unbiased optics of how an Earth colony should operate, and from our current state of affairs, right? And this doctrine could be applied to how we would even set up a moon colony or a
Hmm.
Mars colony, because these are the fundamental aspects of humanity
Hmm.
that we have to face in order to assemble a colony-like mindset of like, hey, we're actually interconnected and interdependent of one another. We're not really independent. Like you're not growing your own apples. You're not growing, you're
Yeah,
not doing anything really by yourself. You're leveraging others that have already have these supply chains set up. So we are a colony. And I find that if we embrace who we really are at the essence, that we are just one really large village.
hmm.
And if we find common ground on a future method of how we operate as a colony, I find that we can ascend through the limitations that we really all can agree with that are limiting our progress. And we can find new and improved ways to ascend as a species. And I hope that that playbook really opens decision makers from across the world to embrace at least the discussion around some of these things, because I've a lot of information is from different corridors from different sectors, insights that have been, that are not public, but that are embedded in some of these sections, that this is how the world works. Like, you may not like it, but this is how it works. And it may be irritating, but it's also healing to talk about these things, because we are but the foundation of our own natural truth.
Beautiful.
So
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Go find him on Substack. And Earth Keepers is the name of the Substack article, and JenoGiordano. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Stuart. Thank you.